Hello and thanks for being with us. The Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has told Sky News that nobody should be cut off this winter because they can't afford to pay their energy bills. In an exclusive interview with Kay Burley, he accused Russia of using energy to divide Western countries, but said the UK must continue to support Ukraine. Now, one think tank has warned this morning that soaring inflation and energy bills will plunge 3 million more people into poverty. Mr Zahawi pledged that there would be additional help for struggling families, but will have to wait until the new Conservative leader is chosen on Monday to find out what that help will be. Now, he was speaking while on a visit to Washington, where the government is working on plans with the United States to stop Vladimir Putin profiteering from high oil prices.
The people that are hurting significantly at the moment are the people of the United Kingdom. How much longer can we afford to support the battle in Ukraine?
Well, I think if we don't continue to support Ukraine in its battle against Putin, against this illegal invasion, the price will be much greater to pay, Kate. I am certain of that, which is why we have to remain resolute. We have to coordinate. If you look at what Chancellor Scholz is doing in Germany, where Germany is much more dependent on Russian energy, of course, other countries in Europe, what is happening in the United States. This is something that we all have to deal with. We welcomed Volodymyr Zelensky to Parliament, had him beamed in live. The Prime Minister stood at the dispatch box and actually reminded the nation that there is more to come in terms of what we need to do, not just the help in terms of weapons and aid, but we need to be resolute and remember why we're doing this. There is war on our continent. Very few people predicted there'll be war on our continent. Wars happened in far-flung places. And our response now, our ability to stay strong, of course, we have to make sure, as Chancellor, as a government, we help those families that need the help, target that help.
Tell me what that looks like.
Well, we're at the moment midway of spending about 37 billion.
Yeah, but it's not enough, Chancellor.
Of course it's not, which is
so
why
what are we going to do?
The moment I walked into the Treasury on the 5th of July, I gathered my leadership team. I said, one, how are we doing on delivering the help? Because it's one thing to announce it, very different to get it into people's accounts. And there was a big focus on that. But equally importantly, I said we need to prepare options for the incoming Prime Minister, because if you think about the help we're putting in,
but tell me what those options look like.
I'm about to take you through. So if you think about what we're putting in now, the most vulnerable 8 million households will get £1,200. Everyone will get £400 off their bill. That really sort of helps with about 50% of this additional increase with the energy price cap going up that's been announced between October and December. I need to begin to think about what happens in January and then in the rest of next year.
When you say begin to think, surely you've already been thinking about it.
Of course. What I meant is we have to deliver for people.
Tell me what it looks like, though, Chancellor.
So there's nothing off the table. We're looking at all the options. Everything from the Chief Executive of Scottish Power talking about help where we need to maybe create some sort of a fund for companies to be able to continue to help their customers, all the way through to making sure that we target the help to both households and small and medium-sized businesses, and probably some larger businesses, because one of my concerns is the scarring effect on the economy if perfectly viable businesses in hospitality and leisure, in high-energy use businesses, would actually suffer or no longer exist because of Putin's use of energy as a weapon.
You said that you were looking at two separate plans depending on who was Prime Minister. How do they differ?
Well, no, I think our responsibility is to make sure we look at the pledges being made by the different candidates. So Liz Truss has pledged to have a moratorium on the green levies.
Do you support that?
It certainly is something that I think will help everyone. It's about £150 of additional help. So we've worked up those options.
But you'd have to put that into general taxation then, wouldn't you?
Well, there is headroom.
You would?
No, not necessarily, because actually we have some headroom at the moment. Certainly, if you look at on the capital side of the balance sheet, we've got some headroom. I've got to make sure I put all those up. There are no easy options. That's the one thing we know. Because
to clarify, are there two separate plans depending on who's Prime Minister?
well, no, what we're doing is making sure we look at the pledges from both candidates, but also look at everything else that we've been told by the energy sector. So I had the energy companies come in to talk about things like liquidity in the wholesale market. I'm working with the Bank of England to look at how we can provide better liquidity in the wholesale market for energy. They tell me that would actually help with about £400 to £500 of reduction in the energy price cap. Look at those companies that are generating wind power and nuclear power but getting paid at gas prices. Can we enter an agreement with them for a voluntary contract for difference, it's called CFD, at a lower price now, because they're not doing anything differently in their business, but they're making very large profits.
It's all tinkering, though, isn't it?
No, that's not. That's actually quite a significant piece of work. But that won't be ready till next winter.
Exactly.
But we have to make sure we get the help, the additional help, from January onwards.
So what's the next round of support looking like in numbers?
So, again, look, what I'm not going to do here, and it would be irresponsible of a Chancellor to begin to talk numbers before a new Prime Minister is in number 10.
But you've been planning it, so you know what it looks like.
Well, because I've got to give them those options.
Sure, so you know what the numbers are, you're just not going to tell me.
Decisions. No, what I'm saying to you is it would be irresponsible, and I think Liz Truss was right on this, she's not going to set a budget during a campaign. She'd need to look at the detail. I would need to present her those details, and of course then she will need to make a decision. What my responsibility is to help her hit the ground running, and that I pledge to you and your viewers we will do.
How concerned are you that people are going to freeze from the cold this winter at home because they can't afford to put their energy on?
I'm deeply concerned. I mean, those people on prepaid meters, we've got to make sure that's why I go back and say to you, my preference is targeting the help. Labour have talked about a sort of universal piece of help that would cost about.
But when I ask you who you're targeting it at, you won't
months.
tell me. So when will we know?
No, what I'm saying to you is actually it's better to target the help for those families that really need it. As we're doing now with the 8 million families getting £1,200, target it for SMEs, so hospitality, high energy use sectors, maybe some larger businesses who are also finding it very difficult. When your energy bill has gone up by 3.5 times, 4 times, it's very difficult to be able to sustain your business. And I don't want to see that scarring effect that we could be left with in the economy. So all that work we will make sure is ready for the incoming Prime Minister. That's the right thing to do. And then, of course, in the longer term, we have an energy strategy that ensures that we have
that involves nuclear?
Resilience. Very much involves nuclear. It involves offshore wind. It involves, of course, tidal energy. I went to visit a company in Scotland that has actually commercialised tidal energy. The beauty of tidal energy is actually you can use it for base load because you can predict the tide. Unlike wind and sun, tidal energy is reasonably predictable. So lots of investment in offshore wind. We've seen an increase in our gas production by about 26% this year because of the policies that Kwasi Kwarteng put in place.
Is he going to get your job, by the way?
Well, that's up to the incoming Prime Minister. If Liz Truss is the Prime Minister, then she'll have to decide her cabinet.
Do you want to remain Chancellor?
I will serve wherever Liz Truss, if she's our Prime Minister, and I hope she is the Prime Minister, decides to...
Even if it's health?
Wherever she decides. You remember what I have always said to you, we are a team. We have to spend the next 24 months delivering for the nation. We have to make sure we help people in this difficult time where Putin is using energy as a tool to try and divide us, both domestically, but also divide us as an alliance.
I know you've got to go. Let me talk to you about Casualty quickly. Is that going to be launched by the Prime Minister?
Well,
he's making a speech, isn't he?
There is ongoing negotiations with...
Is it a good idea?
With EDF. It is certainly a good idea that we continue to invest in nuclear. It broke my heart when I saw that, I think it was a meme, a video of Nick Clegg saying we won't invest in nuclear because it won't be ready till 2021. If we'd made that investment then, Labour divesting from nuclear under Ed Miliband, those things should have happened. If they had happened, we wouldn't be challenged in the way we are challenged today because of Putin using energy. Boris Johnson and I hope Liz Truss will make sure that we deliver nuclear, both in terms of large nuclear, but then the really exciting thing is things like the Rolls-Royce working with Constellation Energy, the US energy company, on the SMRs. These are the future of nuclear, small modular reactors, and then the AMRs beyond that, which are really exciting. We've been talking about them here with our colleagues.
Which is why you're here, yeah, I get that.
So lots of really important investment decisions for the medium and longer term, but not to forget that people will need help this winter. And my pledge to your viewers is more help beyond the 37 billion will also be coming.
But we don't know what it is yet. Final question before I must let you go. I understand that. Can you guarantee to my viewers that not one of them will find themselves in a position where they are cut off because they cannot afford to pay their bills?
No one should be cut off because they can't afford their bills. I'm working with the companies to make sure, and NGOs, of course, to make sure those people who really are struggling get that help, both financially, the 37 billion, but the companies themselves have already started to write letters and emails to ask people if they are vulnerable, if they're feeling that they can't pay, that they should contact their supplier, their companies. My pledge to your viewers is that we will deliver the 37 billion, so that £1,200 to the most vulnerable 8 million households, but we'll go beyond that because we know we need to, and we need to send a message to Mr. Putin that this strategy is not going to work, which is why we have to target the help to the most vulnerable, to allow us to stretch that help as far as we can, and then, of course, make sure that we remain resolute as a coalition to continue to help Ukraine in their battle. They're paying with their lives, with their blood. What we have to do is make sure we continue to help them.
Mr. Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kay Burley speaking there to Nadhim Zahawi in Washington. And our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, is with us now for more on that interview and her analysis of what we heard there. Good morning to you, Tamara. So, plenty to pick up from what the Chancellor had to say. Let's start with him saying that people shouldn't be cut off if they can't pay their energy bills this winter.
I think this exclusive interview in Washington, D.C. is intended to show that the government recognises that more help will be needed, whoever walks into number 10 next week. And Nadhim Zahawi, who is supporting Liz Truss, says more support is coming in addition to what's already been announced. And she echoes that herself in an article in a newspaper today, saying she'll take a robust approach to helping people who can't pay their bills. So a turnaround for her from earlier on in the campaign when she said tax cuts would be enough. I think we're now looking at strong signals from her and her camp that there will be more direct support to households. But he stressed several times there, the Chancellor, that it should be targeted at the most vulnerable households. To give you an idea of who those might be, at the moment, those households who will receive the full £1,200 that the government announced back in May, there are about 8 million of those households. So not the majority, but quite a large chunk of them. Everybody gets £400, but that £400 is spread over 6 months, so it may not feel like a huge amount at the time. The Chancellor also said no one should be cut off by their energy supplier. Very few people are cut off, and there is a long process before that happens. But he says he will work with the energy companies. Many of the big ones commit already to not cutting off customers who can't pay their bills, but to make sure that that doesn't happen. But when you've got the context of more reports today suggesting that 3 million people, this is according to the Resolution Foundation, will be pushed into poverty by the energy bill rises we're expecting over the winter time, the pressure is escalating. And he says it's coming, but you'll have to wait at least a week to find out what support it is.
At least a week for that emergency budget if Liz Truss wins, and we'll find out what happens if Rishi Sunak wins. And you also mentioned there sort of the energy mix that we can expect with the next administration that comes in, and focusing particularly on nuclear energy because of the announcement that we're expecting later today as well.
Yeah, so Boris Johnson is giving a speech today, his last big speech as Prime Minister, and it's about energy security. Now, it's in East Anglia, and it's widely expected that he will give the go-ahead to the Sizewell C nuclear power station in Suffolk. All we know is that he's going to be talking about the need to think long-term about energy security. And you heard the Chancellor there saying, look, if we, in 2010, had given these nuclear power stations a go-ahead, we might have them on stream now. I mean, little simplistic in the sense that neither Nick Clegg nor Ed Miliband, who he also mentioned, were the Prime Minister at the time. A nuclear power station was given the go-ahead by David Cameron back in 2016 at Hinckley in Somerset, and it ended up taking a very long time and being very expensive. And there are also big questions about who funds these nuclear power stations. But I think the broad direction, and we've heard this from Boris Johnson many times, is that he wants to build nuclear power stations so that we are not facing this huge reliance on Russian gas globally, not necessarily just the UK, which is driving up prices everywhere. And so we could see a big announcement by him today. But of course, that will need then to be agreed by the next Prime Minister. You know, he's going out. The next Prime Minister will have to say whether they support it too.
Yeah, and how it's going to be funded, of course. We'll find out about tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Now, let's just take a look at the morning's front pages now. We'll start with the front page of The Eye, which is reporting on Liz Truss being urged by colleagues to help households and businesses immediately should she win the Conservative leadership race. The Daily Mirror features the Resolution Foundation, as Tamara was just mentioning there, saying that millions more people will be plunged into poverty next year and that they'll find their disposable income falling by around 10% on average. Front page of The Guardian, that leads with a warning that children could die this winter if families are forced to turn off their heating. The Daily Telegraph reports that Liz Truss is considering scrapping motorway speed limits and banning smart motorways. The Daily Express says that whoever wins, they'll have an audience with the Queen at Balmoral, not at Buckingham Palace. That's to save Her Majesty from a trip from Scotland. Well, to the war in Ukraine now, and a British national who's been named as Craig Mackintosh has been killed while working as a medic. Let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who was in Ukraine for us this morning. Deborah, good morning to you. So just bring us up to speed. What do we know about what may have happened to Mr Mackintosh?
So his family have released a statement. They set up a GoFundMe site to try to raise money to bring his body home. They said that he was killed last Wednesday on the 24th of August. They said that it happened when he was trying to rescue people from a vehicle, saying that he died in the line of duty. They've said that he's been out here volunteering as a medic on the front line, and they say that he was a hero, and they're wanting funds to try to bring his body home. They said that because he was out here as a volunteer, the UK government isn't able to help them bring the body home. The Foreign Office has actually released a statement as well about his case. They say that we are supporting the family of a British man who has died in Ukraine and are in contact with the local authorities. And now I understand that because the Foreign Office has such a small presence here in Ukraine, it's obviously only limited in what they can do to help. The government has been pretty consistent since Russia's all-out invasion began back in February, warning people not to come to Ukraine to help the Ukrainian forces on the ground here, and instead to support from back home by raising money through charity events. But of course, many people did heed a call from Ukraine itself to come out here to fight and also to volunteer. There have been at least 3 other British nationals who've been killed, 2 of them dying on the front line, a 3rd man, a volunteer, who was captured by Russian forces, Russia-backed forces, held in Russia-occupied territory and died while in detention, really underlining the serious risks that are taken by those who come out here.
Certainly does. All right, Deborah, for now, appreciate that. Thank you. Now, British charities have launched an urgent appeal to help millions of people affected by those huge floods in Pakistan. The UN has called them an unprecedented climate catastrophe. Shaima Mohsen reports now from Sindh.
We're travelling along the Indus Highway in Sindh province between Sevan Sharif and Dadu, where we've been reporting from over the last few days. And all this water here, this is not a natural river or a canal. This is rainwater from this so-called monster monsoon. It has completely besieged this area. All the homes have water going into them, and the electricity pylons you can see behind me, they're completely submerged. There's no electricity in many parts. Pakistan already struggles with electricity service, and there's no telephone signal a lot of lines are down, and internet is wishful thinking in many parts. But beyond that, it's the basics they don't have: food and water and shelter. The people here from this area, many of them have moved out of their own homes and into makeshift tents. Some of them kept back from other disasters back in 2010 when they had floods in this area. Others have used a piece of clothing and sticks to make their tents. They don't want to leave their homes. They don't want to go too far into camps or move along like we've seen in the last few days. Other people have moved to other areas where they can find dry land, but they want to stay close to their homes. They're hoping the water will recede. But that also means while they stay close to this water, they are washing in it, they are drinking from it, and of course, there are no bathrooms around here. This is sewage water mixed with this monsoon water, and there is a serious concern for waterborne diseases.
Well, still to come on the programme. With more than 30 million people in Pakistan affected by flooding, I'll be speaking to one of the country's leading environmentalists. Plus, Britain's intelligence services wants to boost the number of female coders in their ranks. We'll be speaking to the boss of Code First Girls. And a little later, we'll hear from the Labour Party when the Shadow Business and Energy Secretary Jonathan Reynolds is on the show. Well, it was the 12th and final Conservative Party hustings at Wembley last night, and the two candidates stood together at the end, with both pledging that they would bring the party back together, whoever wins, despite what has been at times a very bitter battle. Let's get the thoughts now of Mark Harper, a former Chief Whip of the Conservative Party who is supporting Rishi Sunak. Mark Harper, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being with us. So I'm sure you were at the hustings last night. It did seem as if the mood at the end of it was at least that the party would try and come back together. But how can you do that after such a bitter battle?
Well, look, I think that's right. The party does have to come back together. It will depend on, obviously, what happens in the final analysis. I mean, I agree with what your correspondent, John Craig, said about the hustings last night. I think Rishi Sunak clearly had the support in the room, which is not a trivial thing when there's 6,000 members in the room. And I still think it's all to play for. I think the feedback we've been getting on the streets, on all the meetings that he's been to and at the hustings, and we've been getting from all the phone calls we've been making, is actually not what the polls are saying. And I still remember the 2015 general election, you know, when I was going around knocking on doors, getting really good feedback, and the polls, all of the polls, were saying that Ed Miliband was going to become Prime Minister. So I think it's all to play for. Obviously, polls close tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and then we'll find out the result on Monday.
So you're still confident that your man could win it? I mean, in the event that he doesn't win, I mean, there have been some quite cutting things said about Liz Truss and her economic policies, you know, that she's been taking a holiday from reality, her cost of living plan is not up to the task. If she was to win, how would you guys then get behind someone whose plans are so out of the ordinary as you think they are?
Well, look, I think the positions we've been setting out during this campaign, I think, have been well made. I think Rishi's plan, which is to focus on tackling inflation, to make sure we get help to people who are vulnerable this winter. You know, you can't help people on the lowest incomes and pensioners by cutting national insurance because they don't pay national insurance.
She's ahead in the polls and it's most likely she'll win.
But you can't deliver help to the people that are going to need help. And so I think the problem with plans is that they also have to reflect reality. I think Rishi's plan is totally rooted in the reality that's facing the country this winter, you know, the next few months. And I think that's why he deserves to win. That's what he's been setting out in front of our members. You know, any member, you know, listening to this that thinks that that's the best plan, that hasn't cast their vote yet, you know, they can go online and they can do that.
You've made the pitch and you've been doing that all the time. So, look, you're saying there that her plans aren't real. They're not going to work. If she was to win, how would you be able to support a budget that she put forward?
Well, I think reality is going to intrude. I don't think the plans that she set out are going to stick because they simply don't deliver help to people. I listened to what the Chancellor was saying this morning in America in the interview that he's just done with Kay, and he's talking about direct help being needed, but she's ruled out what she called handouts, and she said that she's going to cut taxes. Well, taxes are great for people that pay lots of tax. But you can't help people who don't pay very much tax by cutting their taxes, and I think we're going to need direct help So I think that is what is going to be necessary, whoever wins this contest.
I mean, Mr. Harper, what you're laying out here is a very fractured party, regardless of who wins, because even if Rishi Sunak wins, I mean, the people who are supporting Liz Truss don't support the position that you're taking right now. So as a former chief whip, what work needs to be done to bring the party back together? But more importantly, what damage have you done to the party by this 2-month campaign?
Well, I think the campaign, I think people understand that during a campaign, people set out their positions. Whoever wins this and gets elected as leader on Monday is going to have to behave in a way which enables the party to come back together. That means doing what both candidates have said, which is appointing a cabinet from across the party, all of the talented people in the Conservative Party. We've got fantastic talent, both in the current government, but also on the backbenches. It means having an approach that's inclusive. It means listening to Conservative MPs when you're formulating policy to make sure you have policy that goes into both the red wall and the blue wall, to use those, convenient shorthands. And it's about the tone of the government and its approach. And I think whichever of the candidates wins, will be wise to follow this approach.
As indeed, OK. Mark Harper, we'll find out in a few days' time whether you were right or not.
Thanks
for being with. Hello and welcome back. Our top stories this morning. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi, has told Sky News that nobody should be cut off this winter because they can't afford to pay their energy bills. A new report warns that British households are on course for the sharpest falling living standards in a century. An urgent appeal has gone out from British charities to help millions of people affected by the flooding in Pakistan. The UN has called what happened there an unprecedented climate catastrophe. Now, in one of his last speeches as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson is to urge his successor to push forward with plans for clean energy and is expected to make an announcement about investment in new nuclear power. That's been backed by the Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, who was speaking to Kay Burley.
Boris Johnson and, I hope, Liz Truss will make sure that we deliver nuclear, both in terms of large nuclear, but then the really exciting things like the Rolls-Royce working with Constellation Energy, the US energy company, on the SMRs. These are the future of nuclear, small modular reactors, and then the AMRs beyond that, which are really exciting.
Well, let's bring in our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, for more on this. Good morning to you, Paul. Nice to have you with us. So, listen, there are plans now to expand the UK's use of nuclear power. Are they realistic? And when do you think these things are going to come online?
They're realistic if the government provides the funding, and that is the question that I suspect will remain unanswered after Boris Johnson gives a speech this morning. He's going to be at Sizewell C, a proposed site of a new nuclear power station, one he is very keen on. His plan was to announce that the government was fully committed to a 20% stake in the power station, which we built by the French nuclear provider EDF, which will take another 20%, with the two parties looking for another 60% from private investment in open markets. It sounds like that final deal of state support has not been agreed, and instead Mr Johnson is going to have to make do with a commitment of several £100 million to help keep the development moving forward. It has planning permission that was granted by the Business Secretary back in July, but there's been some unease about the Prime Minister, who's not supposed to make any big decisions, committing such a large amount of money. But it is part of what was his strategy to deliver at least a commitment to one new nuclear power station every year for the remaining years of the decade. The UK currently has twice as many decommissioned nuclear power stations as it does have operational ones, and nuclear is seen as an absolutely key part of the energy mix to augment the wind farms that we're looking at now. They are providing 20 to 30% of power on a daily basis, but of course they are not running universally. At the moment, nuclear power can only manage about 20% of the UK's needs, which leaves us turning to gas-fired power stations to fill the remainder. And right now, this morning, 70% of the UK's power is coming from gas. So that gives you an idea of why nuclear is so important in the energy mix, why Boris Johnson is so keen to make it a flagship policy. We'll have to wait and see whether he's actually delivered an element of that today, or whether this is rather more another stop on his legacy farewell tour.
Certainly may well be right, Paul. Thank you for now. All right, let's return to the flooding in Pakistan now, where an area said to be the size of the United Kingdom is underwater. I'm joined now by Pakistan's representative for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. That's Mahmood Akhtar Chima. Mahmood Akhtar Chima, good morning to you and thank you very much for being with us. The situation facing your country has been described as catastrophic. It's the climate catastrophe of the decade, so says the Climate Change Minister, Sherry Rahman. Do you agree with her analysis of what's happened?
Yes, I fully agree. This is not only decade, but decades, I would say, I would like to add. Pakistan has faced exceptional situation, especially the year 2022 has been an exceptional, unique year. In the beginning of the year, we experienced prolonged winter. Then this summer, especially April to May, months were the warmest months, last 60 years. We experienced in Pakistan a lot of forest fires taking place. And in one location where IUCN has done analysis and on the request of government of Pakistan prepared this report, over 8 billion rupees loss has occurred in one of the districts in Balochistan, along with one of the incidents, and we prepared a program. Coming to these floods and rainfalls, this is again an exceptional. After 2010 that we received very, very heavy rains and monsoon, especially the eastward and the westward monsoon met, and in Sindh and in Balochistan, we have received in Balochistan 451% more rains compared to the north. Similarly, in Sindh, we have received heavy rains. In KPK, parts of the KPK, we have received heavy rains, and it's not only limited to this. Even mountainous areas, glaciers. This year, we have experienced 31 glacial.
Sorry, Mr. Chima, sorry to interrupt you, but we don't have loads of time. And I did want to ask you another quick question about the situation facing Pakistan. I mean, you've laid out there just the catastrophe that tens of millions of people are having to deal with, and also the fact that previously, for a decade or so, you've known that this catastrophe may well be happening. So I wonder, has enough been done by the government? Is enough funding in place to try and mitigate these kind of situations? I know this is quite unprecedented, but should more have been done to try and stop it being as bad as it is?
Okay, I think one thing which has to be understood is this exceptional situation. The government is grossly undercapacitated. The situation, I think, is much beyond the capacity of the government. International partners, when it comes to emissions, Pakistan is contributing less than 1%. Pakistan is facing huge challenges, the vulnerabilities. You know, top 10 countries that Pakistan is experiencing these heavy flooding situation. The institutions that are responsible need to be capacitated, and I must say that they are trying their level best. But the capacity of the international community, that needs to be made available at the moment. We have national level, National Disaster Management Authority, which is working very hard. We have national and the provincial development authorities, but they need to be more empowered in terms of developing these mechanisms. Or forums that exist, I think, need to be further strengthened. Institutions that are responsible, for example, the meteorological department, we cannot, afford to have assessments that are not precise in terms of, they need to be impact-based assessment done in partnership with. So international community, I think, need to come forward and make best efforts
Mr. Chima, sorry to interrupt you again, sir, but we have run short of time. I do appreciate your time this morning. You've made your case forcefully, and of course another call for greater donations from British charities has been made in the past few hours. So Mahmood Akhtar Chima from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in Pakistan, appreciate your time. Thank you, and best of luck in your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring you some of your morning's other news now. And a long-awaited UN report on China says that that country has committed serious human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims in the region of Xinjiang. It found that China's treatment of the Uyghur and other mainly Muslim groups may constitute crimes against humanity. China has dismissed the findings as lies. The UK government is being urged to put families at the heart of its policy-making in a new report. The Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, says investing in the family is the single greatest investment you can make. We'll be speaking to Dame Rachel later in the programme. And the Conservative Party leadership candidate Liz Truss has said that she is willing to look at scrapping compulsory speed limits on motorways. She also pledged to ban smart motorways. She made the comments during the final Conservative Party hustings last night. Now, Sky News has obtained new figures showing that 350 killings in London since 2002 are unsolved. That represents more than 1 in 10 killings, and campaigners say that black victims are much less likely to receive justice. Lisa Dowd reports.
Beyond, his nickname was Bugs. Yeah, Bugs. He was a character, a serious character, but he loved his music. He's so handsome.
Beyond Brown had just become a dad when he was stabbed 5 years ago.
I don't know why people behave in this manner, I really don't. I don't know why people think it's okay. Just take somebody's life and just walk away.
Beyond's death is one of 350 killings that have gone unsolved in London in the last 2 decades, according to figures obtained by Sky News. In March 2017, CCTV showed Beyond on his bike in Croydon being approached by 2 males just before he was stabbed. After his death, the grime star Stormzy tweeted, "Woke up to hear a childhood friend of mine ain't with us anymore. Rest in peace, Bugs." Beyond's aunt, a former Gogglebox star, won't rest.
And we will catch the people. I know, I pray we'll find them. 5 years on, 10 years on, I'm not going to stop searching.
The figures also show that more than half of unsolved killings in London involve black or Asian victims.
There's a massive distrust of police, not only in London, but across the country in urban areas. And this distrust is particularly acute in areas where there's either large black communities or ethnic minority communities who have had a historic poor relationship with the police. And I think this does hinder policing and investigations.
The Metropolitan Police say that they assure loved ones that unsolved cases remain under regular review, and they've renewed their appeal for information about Beyond's murder. Lisa Dowd, Sky News.
Now, during the Second World War, many women had essential jobs all over the country, not least at Bletchley Park, deciphering the enemy's codes. Now, the call has gone out again for more women to work on the front line of technology as coders. So joining me now is the CEO of Code First Girls, that's Anna Brailsford, for more on what you're trying to do to get women to get into coding. So just tell us, why do we need to have more women coders?
Well, this is a really unique supply and demand issue. Over the next 5 years, we're looking at 1 qualified woman for every 115 roles. Essentially, we need to get more women into coding and onto the front line so they can be makers of our future and to create the products and the infrastructures that we need to protect the country and also to build the economy as well.
Now, when people hear coding, they might get a little bit put off or scared, concerned that they're going to have to learn, computer code, which is another language, isn't it? How challenging is it, and what kind of, qualifications, background do you need to get into it?
So we're quite unique in our approach. What we do is we provide women with free education, and at the moment we're one of the leading alternatives to the computer science degree. So we don't actually need women to have any technological background in order to come in and to learn coding. And what we do is we assess potential and we give them all the skills that they're going to need to be able to get a job in the industry.
I mean, where are all these jobs? Because you said 1 woman to every 150 roles. I mean, those 149 roles are being filled by men, I guess, then, is that the point?
Yeah, it's 115 roles. So where are the jobs? So we work with over 100 companies at the moment within our portfolio. We educate the women for free, and essentially we pre-match them to one of these companies in the portfolio. So all of these companies are hiring right now. Just one example that we have today is within the security sector and within the defence sector.
Which is why we mentioned Bletchley Park, that's GCHQ, and that's working on the front line of the UK's defence against cyber attackers, etc.
It is, very much so. And women are really, really important to moving that forward. Not least of which because if our infrastructures, our algorithms, our data sets are built by people that frankly look and sound exactly the same, there's going to be weaknesses in them. It's going to be easier to hack. It's going to be far easier, essentially, to find holes and weaknesses in our systems and security.
You're suggesting that women might have an inherent advantage in trying to do this work than men would?
It's all in diversity of thought. The more diversity of thought that we can bring into the creation of these systems and processes, the more we give ourselves a competitive advantage. And the greater advantage I think we have as a nation on the stage when it comes to things like global threats.
And how much is sort of the encouragement for girls to get into STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and maths, has this sort of led to this point of having more women getting into coding?
Well, this is an ongoing issue, right? How many girls are in STEM? If you look particularly at something like computing, the figures are pretty sad. All the way from sort of GCSE, where access to this subject is actually limited, particularly in potentially disadvantaged areas and schools in that regard. If you look at A-level choices, around 80% of all A-level candidates are boys. And then take that into university, around 17% of UCAS applications for computer science come from women. In the workforce, that translates to about 20% of women in the workforce. So providing an alternative and saying, look, it's OK to change your mind once you're at university or once you've gone into a career. Code First Girls enables women to do that. And at the moment, we're well over 600% oversubscribed for women who have the potential to move into these jobs. They just need the vehicle to be able to achieve that.
And you're providing that for them. Code First Girls, they can find it online, I'm sure, and I'm sure there'll be loads of them who are looking out for that. Annabelle, it's really lovely to speak to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. The mother of Olivia Pratt-Corbell was at a vigil last night for her 9-year-old daughter who was shot dead at their home in Liverpool last week. It was a dark hour for the community. The church congregation was told. Sky's chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam was there.
In the community she called home, this was a chance to remember those who knew Olivia Pratt-Corbell, the neighbours and friends, in the church where she would have taken Holy Communion in the next year. Away from the cameras, Olivia's mother was among the congregation. We can only imagine what the family continues to endure, but this was those around them coming together in a show of support.
Grief is a very difficult thing, and it'll take them a long time to, well, you never come to terms with what's gone on, but they will certainly be able to suck it in and say that they're not on their own. People here will show an invisible support.
The investigation continues. Police say they're grateful to those who've come forward with information, but that just because arrests have been made, it doesn't mean they need that information any less. Close to the scene of the murder, officers were carrying out another search. The firearm used still hasn't been found. For more than a week now, this community has wrestled with the horror of what happened to Olivia, the questions and the anger and the disbelief. But this was a moment of reflection, a moment to mourn the loss of one young life and the heartbreak of one family.
I hope that the family have gained some strength from seeing exactly how many people have come out this evening. And I know the school have got further things that are going to happen over the next couple of days, so hopefully the family will get a little bit of strength from that, knowing that everybody is behind them, 100%.
It's just a shame that something like this has to happen to bring a community together. And it's really sad. I mean, I feel for, you know, the young children growing up today in a cruel world. And I just hope that they get them.
Next week, children will return to Olivia's school without her, but with support on hand.
So next week is an opportunity to find out just how deep the impact has been on the children and what level of support each child will need. Some will need more than others. Some will know more than others.
They queued to sign a book of condolence in what the bishop called a dark hour for this community, and one still with so many questions. Greg Milam, Sky News, Liverpool.
OK, time now for a look at the day's weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's going to be mainly fine again today, but it will be more unsettled tomorrow, and it's going to be very wet and windy over the weekend. Before then, there'll be a mostly dry start, but it'll be quite chilly in some parts of the north with mist and fog in places. The windy south will be milder and mostly fog-free. The morning will be fine with early fog soon lifting, but the odd light shower is possible. Eastern Britain, Northern Ireland and Ireland are the most at risk.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now you're going to like these. These most detailed images ever of the Titanic have been recorded. Take a look. It's been nearly 40 years since the famous wreck was discovered, 3,800 metres below the surface of the ocean. Now an expedition has brought back the first ever super high-definition footage of the wreck, which shows the ship at the very bottom of the ocean. You can see just incredible detail. Scientists can use the video to help determine the rate at which the ship is decaying and identify any species living on and around it, and maybe they'll find that necklace that was in the film, you know, the one that dropped into the sea. Now, in the next hour, we'll have more reaction on our interview with the Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi.